Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation, which is based on the paper published in the Journal of Astrobiology with the title of Implications of Brain Evolution in Cetaceans, which means whales, dolphins, and porpoises, and primates for highly intelligent extraterrestrial life. So the author of the paper was exploring the parameters that may have influenced the development of brains, exploring comparative measurements between brain sizes of primates and cetaceans, and draw some conclusions from the observations that he had made. So as a brief introduction, I think it is important to first address why doing this kind of comparison is even important. So as we know, there are stars in Earth-like planets which are believed to be over 10 billion years old. So therefore, we can assume that water worlds and moons that contain salty oceans might be quite common in this galaxy. So exploring the evolution of cetaceans and primates could potentially provide us with some clues on to how intelligent life may have evolved on other planets. And with that being said, we should ask ourselves, what are the environmental and behavioral constraints that may have influenced the evolution of extremely intelligent extraterrestrial beings, assuming that such life forms exist? So trying to answer this question, we will address the following topics: brain evolution and extraterrestrial intelligence, brain growth and body mass, dolphins, water worlds, and extraterrestrial intelligence, ecological factors that are related to cetacean body and brain size, as well as whether there is simple and complex life elsewhere in the Milky Way. And for the very end, we will briefly address Dyson spheres. And in the end, I will give you conclusion from the author as well as conclusion of my thoughts. So firstly, circling back to my question, what are some of the environmental and behavioral constraints that are influencing the evolution? So there are some comparative measurements used when we are talking about brain sizes. And today I will be talking mostly about relative brain size and encephalization quotient, which is used to convey how small or how large our species' brain as compared to that of other species of similar body size. And these parameters are frequently used to support the claim that cetaceans are extremely intelligent and that they rank near the top of any list measuring neuroatomical sophistication, right next to great apes, humans, and elephants. And on this slide, you have listed some of the basic facts on the weight of human brains and the average weight of sperm whale, of the brain of a sperm whale. And sperm whale brain is almost 6 times heavier than that of a human. And considering that fact, we can ask ourselves, what factors led a subset of primates rather than a comparatively huge-brained cetacean to dominate our planet? So RBS is defined as the ratio between brain mass and body mass. And figure A shows the typical brain growth curvature for humans and chimpanzees. Defining the first year of life, brain size increases rapidly, and the rate of brain growth continues to decrease in the following years until the adult brain size is reached. The human postnatal brain growth is steeper than that of chimpanzees, which is why adult humans end up with brains that are larger for about 3 sizes of the one of chimpanzee. And on the figure B, you can just see the curvature, which is the plot of RBS against the body size of different primates. So now the question is whether RBS in cetaceans also scale like the ones of primates. And if one includes the largest species of cetaceans, is the overall distribution scale in ways that depart from other mammals? And what we observe is that the relationship between brain size and body size in cetaceans is very strongly nonlinear. Here on the graph, you can see the relative brain size that is postulated against the body size for 47 species of cetaceans. And the largest is Ornithosaurus orca, here on the right, as well as some that have body masses which overlap with those of great apes and humans. And here on the map, on the graph, you can see RBS postulated against body mass of 76 primate species and 29 cetacean species. And we can see that RBS in the smallest cetacean species is more variable and usually greater than RBS averages for great apes of similar body sizes. However, one must be very careful when interpreting this kind of data with the respect of neuroanatomical sophistication. Because unlike Homo sapiens position relative to primate distribution of RBS, no cetacean species is located far above the general cetacean distribution for RBS. And when we're looking at dolphins, which are closest to Homo sapiens in this kind of graph, and which also have quite relatively steep rate of postnatal brain growth compared to other species in their order, just like humans do when they're compared to chimpanzees. We can ask ourselves, do dolphins also have skills that are as far-reaching as the ability of humans? But no matter how social or self-aware dolphins may be, and despite comparative and gross neuroanatomical studies of the very differently organized brains of primates, including humans and cetaceans, attempt to compare levels of neurological sophistication in dolphins, apes, and humans, are at best premature and really not at the state where we could call them reliable or actually comprehensive. However, we can kind of interpret that similar RBS of dolphins and humans can be an indicator that their overall information processing capacity is kind of like on the same level. But does that mean that dolphins are as smart as we are? As I guess that's that kind of depends on what we think of smart, what we think of definition of smart is. I think here the author gave quite a good answer to that. So he says that this is kind of a nonsense question, that it should be quite obvious that all species use their processing capacity in their species typical way. And how might these differences relate to extraterrestrial intelligence, you might ask. So as already mentioned in the very beginning of this presentation, it is estimated that there is many water worlds in this galaxy, and depending on other environmental parameters, which include temperature, oxygenation, available nutrients, and proximity to the habitable zone of their respective suns, one cannot really rule out the possibility that some life forms may have evolved convergent adaptations in parallel with those of early cetaceans, including high intelligence. So indeed, the gravity, so indeed, if we continue on to ecological factors that are related to cetacean body and brain size, gravity is deemed quite relevant, actually for primates as well as cetacean evolution. And when it comes to primates, the smallest body primates live strictly in arboreal habitats, whereas larger-bodied primates shifted to less gravitationally challenging semi-terrestrial habitats, and then larger homoinsins eventually shifted to the full-time ground living that also characterizes Homo sapiens. And after the ancestors of cetaceans entered the ocean, which is around 50 million years ago, some of them evolved large increases in body mass, which is also quite likely in response to relaxed gravitational constraints combined with the availability of sufficient nutrition. And since most variation in mammalian brain size is explained by body size, it is quite reasonable for us to speculate that increased body mass was also initially targeted by natural selection in some species, and that brain mass also increased due to increased body mass. So positioning body mass as the prime target for natural selection as early cetacean underwent adaptive radiation is quite consistent with Bergmann's rule, since increased body mass maximizes body volume relative to surface area, and thus facilitating heat retention in cold aquatic habitats. And similarly to that, cetaceans' globular body shape and lack of long globular body shape likely to promote heat retention, which is according to Allen's rule, and what constrain non-human animals from evolving greater intelligence. One way to approach this is to identify the sequence of factors that appear to have been casually but kind of serendipitously responsible for unique around 5 million year long evolutionary trajectory of homonine cognition. And if we carefully look at the sequence that stands out as the most important, that is those are language, and even before that is involving a pair of extremities that have been more or less dedicated to carrying and making things rather than locomotion. Whereas for cetaceans, we know that their extremities are mostly to kind of move throughout the water. Of course, besides that, as I said, language is arguably the most important one, and it is really what makes human primates stand out apart from the rest of species, as we are on planet Earth, the only ones who evolved fully blown symbolic grammatical language that may be used to generate and receive an endless stream of ideas. So what about the simple or complex life evolution outside of Earth? So obviously it is quite absurd that we would think that in between 5 billion potentially habitable planets, Earth is the only one that is fostering life, or which or on which intelligent beings have evolved. And this is especially true if the emergence of simple life on Earth only began 3.8 billion years ago, and occurred via a relatively simple and broadly applicable process. It has been recently hypothesized that life may have originated via the emergence of simple biologically functional peptides that were used for electron transfer, which were likely a factor that contributed to eventual emergence of more complicated protein fold assembly facilitated by bound metals, and that led to structural diversity that we are observing today. And this explanation entails fewer constraints on the spontaneous emergence of life that was suggested by previous research, including the classic spark discharge experiment that began in the 1950s. Here I'm referring to Miller-Urey experiment. It is seemingly quite reasonable to consider that there is more streamlined hypothesis about the spontaneous emergence of a simple life, as it is possible to model for other potentially habitable planets. And now on to quite an interesting part of this paper, which kind of discussed Dyson spheres. Things get quite a lot more speculative when we turn to possible signs of highly intelligent extraterrestrial life and consider Dyson spheres. So just briefly, what is a Dyson sphere? Basically, it is a megastructure that completely encompasses a star and captures a large percentage of its solar power output. And it is kind of a hypothetical answer on how a civilization would meet its energy requirements once those requirements exceed what can be generated from the home planet resources alone. So the 2015 observation of unusual light curvatures from Sun-sized star located in the Cynegos constellation and subsequent discovery of 21 other similar stars has led to some support of this controversial hypothesis that kind of begins far more advanced than humans may have invented energy capturing megastructures to orbit distant stars. And now we are already at a conclusion. And in conclusion, author references and shares some more pessimistic and some more optimistic points of view. And so firstly, he references Guy from 2021 paper and says that considering Earth being relatively young, there are more opportunities to form intelligent life, and that our species will most likely become extinct, possibly due to weapons or mass destruction, before it has had enough time to achieve widely successful space travel and or colonize space. And it continues on to say that Guy also argues humans have become one relatively genetically homogeneous global population, and therefore Homo sapiens is likely to survive more than another few thousands or to max tens of thousands of years. And then finishes with extinction will still be the fate of humanity. And even if one day the species makes it to the stars, the colonies of humans will be very small and separated by vast distances, which raises the possibility that many will fail for lack of people and genetic diversity, and those that succeed will eventually diverge into completely different species. And on the other hand, he also presented more optimistic view for conclusion, where he kind of discusses basically he cites Zdravko 2019 paper and Joseph and Duval 2021 paper, which kind of say that Homo sapiens is not only inventing new technology, which is radically changing global human society at a phenomenal pace, but the gene pools and our brains of our species are also changing and will continue to change in the process, partially in association with rapid epigenetic changes that affect the nervous system, and partly also as a result of selection for individuals who although are less socially adapted than their peers, are technologically savvy, driven, and creative. And if we can't imagine the breadth of technology and near future of the most intelligent species, and on the one habitable planet that we know well, how can we comprehend the mind, purpose, motives, or technological and scientific capabilities of intelligent extraterrestrials that may have evolved beyond our current level of ability billions of years ago? He also leaves us with a question whether our species may well, he leaves us with his own thought, which cites as, although intelligent life has currently been proven to exist only on Earth, I wouldn't bet against the existence of even more intelligent extraterrestrial beings across whose ancestors evolved on substrates and under circumstances that were conducive to the emergence of open-ended, complex symbolic communication and the manufacturing of complex material culture. And for the very end, I would just like to finish up with some of my thoughts. So I think throughout the presentation, we kind of lost the initial debate between cetacean and primate debate, and especially towards the end, and especially in the conclusion, he did not really include any kind of conclusions, particularly involving cetaceans, and how could they possibly contribute to evolution of life or extraterrestrial intelligence on other aquatic planets. I would like to see in the paper further elaboration on cetaceans, and maybe not necessarily about the ratio between brain size compared to body size, because as discussed in this paper, this really does not fully represent what exactly intelligence means, but perhaps in some using some other parameters. And in the end, it would also be nice just to have some kind of theoretical point of view on how would species that would be similar to cetacean species on Earth evolve in aquatic system, because as we know, cetacean species on Earth kind of evolved from species that were previously on land, and then kind of transferred into oceans. So I would be quite curious to see what would be the author's conclusion on that.